because I don't have enough money to buy slab or anything. So plywood, but I feel like plywood would be like really weird and kind of take apart.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you reinforce the crap out of the bottom, so there's no system to work on.
Yeah.
And our actual was too, like, chisel goes in and glue to the layers.
I remember before I did that class, when I was 26 or something, I was like, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna try bottoming like ahead of time for the classes. I tried it out on the edge of some plywood.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately ruined the way. I was like, oh, that was
sad.
yeah.
You learn more in one cut.
Yeah. I showed up with a ruler of an airplane, he's like, that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, you're good.
That's the one thing we have too many of, which was nice.
Well, the cheapest way to do it is to get 2x4s, but you have to have access to one machinery to glue it up well. But and you can build up the 2x4s and put them on edge and glue them together. That's an awesome process.
Okay. Like in like a planer or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You can't like it, I mean, you can, but you know, those rounded edges and it's not gonna be
It
flat.
just gets weird. Yeah. I like the idea of soft fur, like it's cheap stuff.
Yeah, but the harder the program is. If you're really looking at it, yeah. Well, but you know, the cheapest are like things. Or the cheapest. Anyways, countertop thing.
I looked at some of those, because
Yeah. I got a couple of those on Craigslist. Yeah, the big full kitchen.
yeah. I was trying to use, in the maintenance area of my work, we a lot of times will have nice, like inch and a half. That same kind of thing, dovetail, not dovetail, but, I guess it's just. Yeah. It's really nice, it's painful, but it's nice for the IKEA stuff, because when you turn it over, it doesn't have caps and stuff. But I mean, they order like once a year, so it's
Yeah.
it looks okay.
Okay, so this is they sell Calvin and they do some. They'll have a big.
Yeah.
Irregular but regular sources of actually.
Yeah.
Not just like crap.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you're right by there.
But if you're in Southeast already, I used to go when I was teaching.
Hi, again.
Comes the scrap there's all like crap.
Yeah.
Most people were doing very simple program or prototyping, which they're gonna do. I mean, it's
Right.
or
Yeah, exactly.
or they know enough to choose to take the scrap. That would definitely like the they're cool.
You too.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing, is if you're doing a lot of scrap, I feel like. Keep character and stuff.
We got a lot.
I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I feel like, man, I'm not that old, but I like gotten older, and I watch the scrap editor and all of the weird things like millions or anything. Skyrocketed.
Yeah.
It used to be able to go to a million, and it's just like. Basically buying scraps. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How's it going? There's beer and chips and salt and stuff here, and you make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's an idea.
How's it going, everyone? All right. Hello, and welcome to tonight's meeting at the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club. We're your hosts this evening. I'm Tobias, and this is Will. Together we have a number of curious and exciting topics to share with you.
As attendees of the Hand-Eye Supply Curiosity Club, you are all now members, provided you adhere to our philosophy. Ex curiositas scientia. We pledge to learn without prejudice in pursuit of our mutual goal, perpetual novice. We admit that it is impossible to know everything about anything, and thus remain perpetually curious and perpetually novice.
This is our flag and our mascot, Franklin. The lightning bolt represents the receipt of knowledge, the enlightenment of illumination, the resonance of truths understood. It awakens and excites us and makes us hungry for more. Now let's give a warm Curiosity Club welcome to Amanda Wall-Graf.
Well, I'm really happy I'm allowed to be a novice. That makes me feel a lot better. Well, that's nice to see so many faces here. Maybe it's always this busy, but makes me feel good. I'm going to talk about hustle tonight. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit and then launch into the topic. So introduction, Amanda Wall-Graf. I'm a furniture designer and builder. I do a variety of things, but I've been woodworking for about a decade in various guises. And I have a custom residential furniture shop that I operate out of Southeast Portland. I do some custom, I do some work for Danner Goods and Tanner Goods and Danner Boots. But then mostly it's residential beds, dining room tables, stuff like that for individual customers. I've been in Portland for about 7 years. I came here to go to Oregon College of Art and Craft, where I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts concentration craft, specialty woodworking. That's the official term. And I also teach up there now. I teach community classes pretty much every semester, long ones, 5 to 10 week elements of furniture making, advanced projects, stuff like that. And then I do weekend workshops and Nike workshops up there as well. And I also just launched Heno, this online retail shop that has more products that are available, multiples as opposed to custom. And it specializes in home office goods, mostly organizationally focused in wood and brass. And the idea is to clear up clutter and make everything look nice and fancy. So that's a whole new exciting front that I'm exploring right now. I'll just show you a few examples of my work, but you saw my website, so you can go to them if you want to see. This is all custom work that I've done recently. I've been doing side jobs for a long time, but I just went full-time about 1.5 years ago. So these are all within that time. Wardrobe. This you can't really see. It's a bar called the Cardinal Club. It's across from the lawn. There's a theater beside the bar. It's all Oregon. I use all Oregon sourced wood and certified and all that kind of good stuff. In all of my woodworking, the custom, the Heno, any side things I do, I strive to use good materials, interesting detailing,
fine craftsmanship to transform the routine things of every day. So my main goal is to replace what was mundane and make it special and beautiful. All the things I'm passionate about. I'm going to go over my history. I'm going to try to be brief, but I think it will be relevant later in the talk. So, like I said, I've been woodworking for about a decade. Before that, I had absolutely no experience with woodworking. I barely even used a drill or anything like that. So I lucked into a cabinet shop that would hire me in Toronto, or I'm from near Toronto. And I worked for $10 an hour standing and doing all sorts of weird stuff like we were just talking about, just to see if I liked it and to try it out and figure out what the hell I was doing. And then after about a year and a half, I was lucky enough to get hired by this guy who, his name's Stephen Hogwood, and he got famous in the 70s for making this gigantic lathe out of a truck axle. Him and his father-in-law did this like crazy thing. And so he would turn these giant things, you can't see in that one, but he'd turn these discs that were like 7 and 8 feet across, and then he would slice them up. So he turned a disc that was all like crenellated, and then he'd cut it into quarters, say, and it would come out, and one thing would be a bird shape, and the other thing would be a chair, and like a coffee table. So that's what he did in the 70s. And then he transitioned into sort of smaller things where he turned them and took them apart and reassembled them. And I just lucked into working for him, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I was the only employee, so I learned a lot there. And he really focused on teaching me, showing me books, telling me about people in the field and all that kind of stuff. Just really lucky. And then I moved to Halifax and worked for a dimensional sign company. So you can see I'm going from like cabinets to weird journey guide to dimensional signs carved and gold leafed and everything. Then I came to Portland to go to school, but I continued working. Worked for Doug Chamblin. That was a weird cabinet that got made, which was really cool. Gold leaves, a drawer, a sculpture by Esk Studios on top. I made stagecoaches a little bit. That one. I helped make that one, and that was cool. They did a mail run. They delivered mail. So they drove from here to Seattle or something, delivered mail, and people could buy tickets on it. And every 10 miles they'd stop and do like a little festival. So a wide range of things, just as long as I was woodworking, I was happy. You may recognize this, it's painted now, but this is a used store. It's off of Sandy and 28th. You can see it from I-84. You might not know this, but at least one story of it is all woodworking shops. Totally no signage, dark and weird. You go in there and you go up this weird elevator, and then you go up to that second story, and there's just a long hall with green doors on either side, and every single door has a shop with like 5 guys in there doing whatever weird thing they do. There's a guy that has an African gray parrot and makes wooden cameras. You probably know him, yeah. You know that guy, he's in there. And there's, cabinet makers and artists and all sorts of fun stuff there. So actually, when I first got to Portland, my first job was in there, and then you can just bounce from guy to guy. There was like one woman in there. Just typical. And then I spent 2 years working at Fieldwork Design. They're a design architecture company. And this was a little trailer we built. It has burned wood on the outside, and like a cedar, like a little sauna or something on the inside. It was really fun to build. To show the variety, I wanted to show the variety of all the weird little, this is part of the hustle. All the weird little pieces, you're like, that sort of applies, I'm going to try it out and see what happens. And then also alongside teaching, and then finally, a year and a half ago, went off on full-time. So which brings us to the official topic, the power of the hustle, passion, community, and creativity in a town where you're a dime a dozen, aka Portland. It's been really exciting to live in Portland because of all the makers and everybody doing interesting stuff, but it's also hard not to feel like a cliche and feel sort of, maybe not invisible, but like how do you make this thing work? And so I thought I'd talk about it partly as an instructional talk and partly as a talk for myself too, because I would say I'm sort of like middling as far as success goes. I'm doing it full time, and I have times where I'm really busy, and then I have times where it feels like the crickets are chirping, and I'm always thinking, what do I do next, what do I do next? So I figured I'd just explore things that I've learned, things that I see that work for other people, and then maybe at the end, we have a Q&A, or even better, just a brainstorming or any other ideas that people have, or just conversation. And when I think of the hustle for this talk, I'm thinking people like me and the people that I know, which are just a person on their own, basically, or a micro business. I like that term because it makes me feel a little bit more legit. I learned that I did this great program at Mercy Corps, which I can mention later, but they really push that micro business, and it really helps because sometimes working by myself, I can feel like maybe, is this a real business? Is it not a real business? But it is a real business. And I like the idea of a micro business because it's about making a living from what you love to do and what you're passionate about doing, rather than saying, I'm going to start this company and then figuring out what that company is going to be. So this talk is all about hustling for that passion, for that thing that you really love. So, sometimes I feel like that can be a bad word, obviously, especially in this town that's really focused on being authentic and everything. So I want to give it a good rap, because you got to make money. I mean, you've got to, or else you can't do what you love. And I also think the term hustle is more dimensional than just the sort of slimy huckster thing that's got on board. I think it implies sort of a toughness and a vitality that help you succeed, and that's what I want to celebrate and encourage, especially in this complicated field where you're not quite sure where you might fit in if you're doing something creative. I think that you've got hustle when you and other people, for instance, potential clients or colleagues, know what you're about, know what your meaning is, and know what you're worth. You've got the hustle if you're creative in the ways that you connect to other people, and you have confidence that you belong in a scene. I believe that this is what eventually leads to success, and so I'm going to focus on that. And I'm going to focus on pretty much 6 elements that I've identified about hustle that can help you succeed, which are value, trust, clarity, community, energy, and confidence. And I'll talk about that in more detail. So first of all, value for what you're worth. And that's figuring out what you're worth and convincing other people that you figured it out. So the why before the what. You know, what you do. I make furniture, I make residential furniture, but is that the interesting part to people? Or is it why do I do it? What is it about woodworking that I love? What is it about custom-made furniture that is important to them? How does that affect their life? And why should they care about your particular woodworking over somebody else's woodworking? So these are really general things, and I could get into more specifics, but I don't know what everybody does. So, for me, like, I really love the problem solving, and I love the accomplishment. I love seeing the product, and I love seeing people use it. I like to see people go up and like stroke the desk and stuff like that. There's all these like qualities that come from it that I think if you focus on that, you can really find your own worth for yourself and for your potential customers, or whatever, people that you want to be excited about what you do. That question, so what do you do? I find myself at parties being asked that question, and I go, I'm a furniture maker, and then they go, oh, like I do something totally different, I don't know anything about your world, and then I get all insecure and stuff, which is really silly. But when you're a creative person, sometimes your answer is a bit unusual. Or maybe it's not even that you're a furniture maker, maybe it's more complicated than that. Like I said, I do a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and I have a part-time job to do ends meet and stuff like that. But what I've seen too much is people go, oh yeah, I do this, and then they get insecure, and so then the other person has no opening, and they feel like an idiot because they don't know, like, oh, you're an interaction designer, I don't know what that is. And then but it's a really cool job, so I think it's important for creative people like us to just take a minute and be excited about what we do and convey that excitement. So when people say, what do, you say, well, actually, I make furniture, and if you see that glazed look, or you see people standing around awkward like that, you can go, it's really cool, I love like making decisions or whatever it is that you like about it. Something general that can connect to their experience, even if they're not a creative person. it sounds like maybe that wouldn't matter, but I think it's these things that sort of build the atmosphere for yourself and for others, make you feel like you're doing something interesting, make them connect to you, and so on and so forth. It's all these little things that create the right atmosphere for sort of just thinking positively, even when you're struggling, which is what you need when you gotta hustle. You gotta keep that positivity up. So, that's my thought about that. What you're worth, literally, the cost of your product. So there's the cost of your production, which is pretty obvious. You gotta charge the materials, you gotta charge the hours. And if you don't, you're not gonna make a living. And that sounds simple too, but so many people charge less for their hours or something because they wanna get that job. But at a certain point, it's just not worth it. You might as well just get a day job because you only have a finite amount of energy. If you're pouring it all into something and making $2 an hour at the end, you're gonna run out. And you also have to keep in mind the education, the cost of your education, the cost of your expertise, and that comes back to figuring out your value, your intrinsic value, so that you know what you should charge. And the status, does charging higher prices give you higher status? I guess is the question. And by going under what you're worth, are you squashing your status and putting yourself down into a different category that you don't want to be in because you can't make enough money? It's hard. I find it hard because sometimes that price can get really high, especially with furniture. And if I'm a person who can't afford that price, it's really hard to say that price to somebody else, but you just got to do it because I've seen so many people just get worn down by not making the right amount of money. And also, somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, that the appropriate amount of jobs to be getting is 30% of what you bid. So 70% of people are saying no, and 30% are saying yes, which you do get a lot of no's. And when you get no's, you think, oh God, I should put my price down, but sometimes it's just not worth it. So I always ask myself, when would it be better to get a normal, day job? When is this going to make me feel burned out and shitty, and it's time to get a day job? This is an example of someone who I think charges high prices, and it's obviously working for her. Everything's sold out on her website. That spoon's $235. That spoon's $215, and it goes on, it gets more expensive. Everything's sold out. I don't know, she's got a good business plan because she's too busy to take custom work. Everything's sold out on her site.
What is it?
What is it?
Yes.
Spoons.
Well, these are spoons. Her name's Ariel Elasco. Nice little spoons. Yeah, it's very dark. But she also makes panels of lath and plaster. You might have seen, she's all over the internet. She knows how to use Instagram. She makes panels to hang on your wall, geometric patterns made out of lath and plaster, the lath part. And then she makes these little spoons. So just an example that you can charge high prices. She's done a lot of things, I think. I don't know her personally, but looking at her website, she's done a lot of things. She knows her worth. She communicates her worth. She charges high prices, so she puts herself up into a certain status. All these things that make it, obviously, it's working. Well, I don't know what you do now when you want to buy something off her. So, publicity, drive versus drain. This is knowing your worth when somebody's asking for something. So, I don't know about you guys, but in my field, I get asked for a lot of things for free. And sometimes that's worth it, and sometimes it's not. And knowing when to share has a lot to do with knowing how much I value my product. Because saying yes can be good. Saying yes gets you into new places, it gets you in front of new eyes, but you have to ask yourself how much energy does it take, again, as usual. For instance, how much work does the thing that they're asking take? Like, is it something that you already have, or is it something you're making from scratch? Making something from scratch, it could take, in my case, like 2 weeks plus all the material and stuff like that. It would have to be a really high payoff. But if it's something I already have, like I did an end table for a show home, for instance. I already had it. They put it in the show home. They put my business cards on it. It was worth it because it was already made for another reason. And so that's one question to ask yourself. Another thing along the same lines is how much work does it take is, you know, sometimes I'll be asked to be a guest at a critique, and sometimes I'll be asked to put on an art exhibition. And those two things, obviously, one is a lot more work than the other, but it's also, some of them are more in line with my goals. So being a guest at a critique, I'm interested in connecting to community. Doing an art exhibition, I'm actually not interested in being an artist. So obviously, I get in front of a lot of eyes, but for the wrong thing. And that's important because it's hard to say no to opportunities, but sometimes they don't apply. Along the same lines is asking yourself, so not only asking yourself how much energy do you put into it, but ask yourself, what do you need? So I don't need people to think of me as an artist. But for instance, do you need visibility? Are you holed up in your shop wondering if anybody knows that you exist? Then maybe doing something for free in a high traffic area is worth it. But it has to be sort of in your style. Like, I just got asked to do a cash wrap for someone, and they were in the Pearl, and they wanted a deal because of the high visibility. Now, I couldn't do it because they had a deal that was less than the materials. But also, they already had an idea of what they wanted, and it wasn't in line with my aesthetic that I'm trying to push forward, and so I wasn't going to be making progress. I was going to be seen, and people were going to know my name, but I wasn't going to be making progress in the right spots. So, and it didn't seem clear at first. At first, I was like, great, the Pearl, everybody will know it's me now. So you always have to just go back to these simple questions that you can ask yourself. Or is it something that somebody's going to let you design? You're not going to make much money, but you maybe have that hole in your portfolio. Like maybe you don't have any media cabinet in your portfolio or something like that, and this way somebody's going to pay for the materials and a little bit of your time, then maybe it's worth it. But if you're further along in your career and your portfolio is all filled out, then of course it's not worth it. And then finally, inspiration. Sometimes doing these pro bono things can give you that inspiration that you need to stay rejuvenated. So there's reasons that aren't financial that are very important, and I'll talk a little bit more about rejuvenation later. And then finally, with publicity, drive versus drain is the drain of social media. Is it worth it? How much time can we possibly spend? How great can it possibly be? Obviously, Facebook, Instagram, commenting on other people's blogs, all that stuff that we're told to do. And I think it is good. That person that sells the spoons for $235, Instagram, that's her deal. Like, she's got tons of followers. I should have looked up how many followers she has. But she has tons, and she gets jobs through Instagram, and it helps her craft her brand. And so that's good, and it fits into what Sherry does. And I think that's the most important thing. If you already do Instagram and you already find it fun, you can fit in some of your creative, show your process, for instance, on your own thing. Really simple. If you're not using Facebook, or you're only Facebook friends with your relatives, then maybe starting a Facebook page isn't that great. Or maybe if you don't have any timely announcements to make, like you're not going to be doing giveaways or events or stuff like that, maybe Facebook isn't that great. Then you're just making up fake posts just because you think you're supposed to be posting to Facebook all the time. But, and then I think the final thing, or the second final thing, is that decide how much time you want to spend on it, and just, you gotta say, I'm only going to spend like 1 hour a day on these things, or whatever it is. You decide how important social media is to you, because otherwise, you know how it is, you get sucked in. But most of all, I think it's important to be sincere. I think it's really obvious when somebody's got a Facebook page just to drum up business. It's got to be partly to drum up business and partly because you're excited about what you're doing and you want to share it with people. I think it always comes down to sincerity. People can really see that. And then maybe the hardest thing about knowing your value is proving your price point. Prove to the people why your spoon is $235. Or like furniture gets really expensive, and you got to prove it to somebody somehow. So you've already gone through the exercises of the why before the what, and learned what you're worth to yourself, which is the first step, because you need to have the confidence to stand behind that price. Most creative people's products are pretty expensive because of the time and the special skill and the personal vision and all that kind of stuff. And it's really hard because people are used to mass production. They're used to actually getting quite a bit for very little, and in ways that you can't possibly compete. I can't compete with IKEA. I can't buy the material for the price they sell the thing for, right? So you just can't even compete with that sort of thing. I think what you really have to do is go find the emotional appeal of your product instead of the technical, or as I've heard it put before, the benefits rather than the features. So rather than list has this drawer and this and that. I mean, you can list that, but focus on the emotional impact. How does your thing improve somebody's life? How does it take away a negative? How does it mesh with who they are or their philosophy? And I just wanted to show you this example. There's no way you can read this, but I was hoping that you could. This is a little screenshot from Pinch Design. They're a furniture company from London that I think really does all this stuff really well. And they also charge about what I do, or maybe a little bit more, but in pounds instead of dollars. So, they're doing well. And this is their About page. And I guess I'll read it out loud because you can't see it. But I think they do a really good job of proving the price point by appealing to our emotions. So they say, right there, it says, our work celebrates simplicity of form, the purity of a good shape, and our emotional connection with the materials around us. We live in a cluttered world and understand that any furniture or product has to work very hard to win its place. We believe in poetic design, making beautiful things, pieces that endure, inspire, and aspire to be inherited. So I think they did a great job of presenting their vision, simplicity, form, blah, blah, but also, celebrates, just the words they're using, celebrates purity, emotional connection, obviously. And this sentence, we live in a cluttered world and understand that any product has to work for it. That's, I think they're tapping into something that we all feel about all this stuff, the accumulation of stuff. And they're saying, we recognize that, and so we're not going to make just any old thing. So not only are they tapping into what we believe or are worried about, but they're saying their product is so good that it's the one that deserves that special place. I think that's quite a statement. And then they go back into that emotional language, poetic design, beautiful things, and then some more values of endurance and inheritance. So that lasting thing in the face of all the clutter of the world. So I think they did a really great job, but one thing that they didn't do is they talked mostly about themselves, as opposed to the person who's going to trust them to buy it. But then they get into it later. I can't even tell where. But it says, we delight with the fact that our clients engage with our products differently to create very personal and particular spaces. And later, we hope that all our clients will use our pieces to create environments that invite and embrace and contribute to a sense of harmony, interest, and resonance. So it's the client being empowered to interact with their objects and to use them to something greater. Not, oh, you're going to like this desk and you're going to write on it. But you're going to have this amazing environment. You're going to have this harmony and this resonance in your life that you're looking for because of this product. So, but it's still pretty straightforward language and it's not too phony, if you ask me. So I think they've hit the nail on the head as far as proving that price point. And I think that's something especially important that we all could work on. Not to judge anybody here. I don't know anybody here's stuff, but me and my peers. So that's your value. The other thing is establishing trust. Why should you be trusted? And that's really important, especially if you don't know the person, if it's through your website or something like that. Why should they put their trust in you to give you their money and hope something comes to them that they like? And I think it mostly comes down to honesty. So while we're focusing on hustle, I don't mean the hustle as in that car salesman's pitch thing. You want to make an invitation, not a pitch, because people don't like a hard sell, and they want to like you, because that's part of this whole like custom creative thing, is that it's partly about your relationship too. And you want to avoid, in the interest of honesty, you want to avoid corporate speak and art speak. Obviously, everybody knows that, but I'm going to give you an example anyways. This is a local company, Caravan Pacific, and I don't know her, but I like her lamps. And this is the About Us page of the website. And so, just to contrast, this is a piece of hers. It says, by using quality materials, expert craftsmanship, and inspired design, we strive to make lighting and home goods that endure the test of time and are worthy of being passed on to future generations. Simple, nice, makes sense. Or, this photographer, who I won't say who it is, not local. In giving careful attention to the mediating filters that propagate socially constructed irreverence, I aim to address the necessity of breaking down the symbolic paradigms of understanding to revisit the overlooked empathy for humanity and its greater accountability to each other. So, all grammatically totally incorrect. And you don't know what he's saying, and you know that he's trying to, or she is trying to elevate themselves and sort of put you down, and that's not going to create a good relationship where they're going to want to trust you. Secondly, an attitude of reassurance and kindness. So if they take that step and buy your thing, they might be anxious, especially if it's expensive. So to reassure them right away, either by sending it right away so they get it and they know. But like in my case, like if they buy a desk on my website, I make it once they order it, so they have to wait a couple weeks or a few weeks. So I always send an email. Thanks for buying this. I'm really excited to make it. Just confirm that you're a real person. This is a real process that they're taking part in. With my custom work, I always give a couple of check-ins. Like even if it's not due for 2 months, which is really long, it's usually not. But I'll email every once in a while with a little process shot from the shop and say, hey, this is my favorite part. I love working on this part. And then they're engaged in the process and they know you're still working on it, and then it builds an excitement for them to get the piece. And it builds that relationship. I think that's really one of the most important things that I've learned. And then what I mean by kindness are just these little extra touches that you don't necessarily have to do, but that you do. For instance, writing a little handwritten note, say, this is pretty dark too, but this is a company called Mallet. It makes little toys, and those are bike handlebars. And I think even your packaging can be sort of, maybe kindness isn't the right word, but it's like that nice little extra gesture. So he packages them in wood shavings. So the packaging, and then he has a little hand rubber stamp that he stamps the little card and they write something in it. It all goes together. The packaging has sort of the same message as the product, and it's like this nice experience for the person. Like, i.e. Apple products, it's always so nice to open them, but this is like a different message, right? So that's a little kindness. When I do custom work, I always give the person a CD of the images of the process as I've gone along. So I'll even take a picture of the type of tree. If it's like a walnut table, take a picture of a walnut, take a picture of the lumberyard, and then, all this every time run away. And maybe they don't care, I don't know, but maybe they do. And maybe it makes them excited about what they've taken part in. Because that's part of buying this expensive thing, is you're taking part in the process with the maker. And sometimes you do cool things, like I made this bed, the headboard was like burned wood, and so I videotaped the process of burning it, and then I did like a little time-lapse video, and And I put that on the CD for them, and they went wild about that one. So it's like all these little touches that just reinforce why you should be trusted, why they should come back. Expertise versus jargon. I don't really have to say too much about this because it's similar to the art speak thing, but you want to be seen as an expert because you are. It takes time and skill to do what you do, and people don't want to pay for something that seems too easy. They don't. I mean, when you see a product on Pinterest that seems too easy, you're like, oh, I can make that. You know, you don't want to spend money. But you don't want to go into every detail about why it was hard and like try to make people feel like an idiot. They don't want to be talked down to, and so it's always finding that mix between knowing your value but being sincere and respecting the person that you're working with. Sharing your hard-earned knowledge. That can be really hard sometimes because you've worked hard for something that you know or something that you've learned. And it's hard to feel like, well, if I tell somebody this, then, like if I tell somebody about how to make this product, maybe they'll make that product. You know, maybe they will. But it's sort of that open source debate. I guess it's exactly that open source debate. Should we give stuff away for free? And I don't have an answer. I don't know as far as financially if it's the right thing to do. But I do think that there are some benefits to it. And one of them is creating that, presenting yourself as someone who knows something. And you can't do that without sharing your knowledge. Teaching classes and workshops, doing talks, and panels can position you as an authority. But not to be a know-it-all, but just to show that you can be trusted once again. Other freebie things is like giveaways and contests and stuff, and I've never done that, but I know people who have done that pretty successfully. Like they'll have like a Friday. One guy I know, his company, Revolution Design House, they do I think it's called Feature Grain Friday on Facebook. They're like this product that they always offer, they're like, oh, this one has a cool knot in it. It's going to be on sale on Friday. And I think it works. But what it does at the very least is brings people to your site, which is important. But it also might make them take a chance on you. Oh, I can only get this on Friday. Maybe I'll just go for it, even though I've been looking at this website forever and ever and not buying anything. Free information is another way to do it. A little how-to tutorial or a little booklet or something like that. It brings them to your site. It also might make them like you more. And what I think is most important, it makes them more engaged in what you do in your process. And so it makes them more excited. And maybe they don't buy something right that day, but they're just a part of the whole thing. And you're just building this interest and this enthusiasm on their part and on your part. And I think that's really important to keep that energy up. So, oh yeah, and there's this guy I was talking to who teaches this upholstery class. And he said he was just teaching it because he wanted to share his knowledge. But what he found was that people would come in thinking, oh, I'm going to upholster my couch or something like that. And they'd start with a little stool because they had to. And then they'd be like, oh my God, this is so hard. I suddenly understand why you charge the prices you do, and I'm going to take my couch to you. And I'm then there's this nice, like, they know what's involved sort of thing. And I've had students commission me for work, and I find it a really satisfying partnership because they know, they have a background, they know about the woodworking, they know about the design, they know about what goes into it, and they're excited about it already. So it's a nice, really positive relationship that can come from that. It's not always just about making more money, it's also about having nice, positive relationships. And my favorite example of whether you should give stuff away for free is, what's her name again? Lindsay Allen. You may have seen these kind of lights all around. She makes these lights for sale. She has a ton of different models. But she also has a free set of plans on her website for the exact same light that she sells. You just download it, you get all the instructions and all the parts and everything. And then you can buy a kit of parts through somebody she's partnered with, or you can go out and get the parts yourself. And she doesn't make any money on that. And on the flip side, this is a store in Seattle that carries her lights. I don't know if you can see, I don't know where the price is. $12,500 for this light. So, the person who's gonna pay $12,500 for a light doesn't care about this free thing. They're not gonna go, oh, I'm gonna make this. They're in a whole nother thing. They're doing a whole other thing. They just want to buy it. But the person who's gonna download the free plans is never gonna pay $12,500 for a lamp. So she's got this perfect thing where that free plan gives her a lot of publicity. A lot of publicity. I see her all over Pinterest and in magazines and all over. Just from that thing. But then she's still selling tons of lights, so it obviously works. And she's really successful. Be judgmental. This is just a little side note of something you can do to be trusted is judge competitions. I've been judging, for some reason, I've been judging a lot of competitions lately. And not only is it really fun, but, and like you go to weird, I just went to a high school in Lake Oswego last week and judged all this high school art. It ended up being interesting, but you get connected to unexpected communities. You see a whole other side of things, but it also is something that gives you authority in the eyes of potential clients and in your own eyes. I don't know about you guys, but that to me, I always need this like constant, anyways, it gives you that. Gives you confidence in your own authority, and it's kind of fun. So that's another little thing you can do. All this stuff is kind of the same, leads to this be the A and Q&A. Similar tactics. Ultimately, what your ultimate goal is to get people engaged with your world, your process, and what you're passionate about, and you want to bring them into your world and position yourself as knowledgeable and skillful in that world, so that you can have these trusting relationships that lead to success. So some thoughts that I had on how you can do that, besides what I've already talked about. Having instructional videos on your website of whatever it is you do, or one little piece of what you do. You could even have a theme-based and potentially time-based, like Q&A session, live Q&A session on your blog or your website. You could write an article for your blog, for somebody else's blog, for an actual magazine. Give a talk. There's all sorts of things you can do. As long as it's in line with what you care about and it's not just for the hustle, then I think it will work. Keeping it tight. That is doing things quickly and doing things clearly. So you think it would be the easiest thing, but clarifying who you are. I struggle with that all the time because you know too much about yourself. You're trying to like pack it all in, and you don't know how to just do that elevator speech, which is a term that really sort of cheesy, and everybody goes, oh no, not the elevator speech, because it's like every business class tells you to do the elevator speech. But if you think about it as maybe like a tweet, for instance, short, sweet, confident, clear, then maybe it'll be easier to do. But like one sentence, who you are and why it matters. And that goes back to the why. You have to say what and for who. You have to say, I make furniture for residential customers, but you have to say that other thing too, what you care about. I'm still working on this, but one thing I think is useful is mind mapping it. And not mind mapping, don't put elevator speech in the middle, and then stuff like that put in the middle like, why do I give a shit about this? Like, what do I value? What do I love about going to my shop and doing my thing? Do I use my product? How do I use it? What problem does it solve? What joy does it bring? What values does it have inherent in it? And also, what do people bring up when they come in your shop? Like, people come into my shop and they go, I love the smell of wood. Everybody says that. And so it's important to pay attention to those things because you realize the materiality of what people respond to and how it makes them feel and what's valuable. What are those intangibles that your product can bring? Like I said, the smell of wood, the warmth of the material, the idea that this thing could last forever, the idea that your surroundings could be beautiful. Those are things that people mention that I think is valuable for a woodworker to hear. So whatever you do, just think about your shop or people interacting with your work, what do they say when they're being excited about it? Not when they go, oh, I like that, that's cool. Clarify your offer. It's really easy to make a website with everything you've ever made and drawn or you're thinking about making, and it's just nobody's going to click through all those images. It's just, or like 10 images of every object that you've ever made. It's just, people are too impatient for that. I think nowadays they want to just go click, 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 and sort of understand what you're offering. And that's why I do my stuff in silos. That's why I have wallgraf.com for my custom work. I have Heno for my products. And then the teaching is this thing. It's not that I don't mention, it's not that they don't overlap, it's just that I'm trying to keep them into understandable spheres. Yeah, people just don't want to spend time. They don't want to spend time sifting through images. They don't want to spend time on what do these things have in common. Like, what are you? Are you a furniture maker? Not me personally, but like, are you a furniture maker, an architect, or this, or that? It's like when you go to Vimeo, or when you watch a video, if it's too slow, like if the pacing's not right, you just click off and go to the next video. At least I do. And what I want is that video to captivate me or to get to the point, one or the other. So you've got to think that way about your website too, I think. Back to this person, Ariel Alasko. Get it on. No, she offers two things. She has two products. She does the spoons and she does the panels. She has 3 tools: a bandsaw, a nail gun, and the carving tools set. So she has clarified, well, she's clarified who she is. Like, everything is the right aesthetic, everything goes together. And she's clarified what she offers. And there's 2 things. So, and she's really successful. So it's important to assess what you're doing and to assess, well, what are people responding to and what should I put my energy in? And what do I care about? Try to find that magical combination. And makes your hustling a lot more effective if you know who you are and what you're offering. Make time for skill, not hesitation. So, in other words, you want to be good at what you do. You want to take time. You don't want to be a hack. You want to take time to have a skill and to be an expert and not fake it. You really want to have that knowledge. But try to launch your products as fast as possible. That's what I'm learning. Because if I don't, I just sit around mulling about it, doing prototypes over and over again, and getting worn out before anybody's seen anything. And you just can't keep that up. And you also don't know it's going to be successful. And the more time you spend before you put it out, the more time you start spending on second guessing yourself. And thinking, oh, this isn't quite right, or I'm going to do this and that. And it just starts getting crazy. You could procrastinate forever that way. And you just need to get it out there and see what works. Like, I just put out this Heno thing, and already I can see how many visitors I'm getting to the site, and you can see I use a big hotel template, and they show you who's looking at what product. I mean, how many people are looking at the products. So I'm already seeing who's looking at what product most, and what product is not grabbing anybody's attention at all. So I just made 6 products, I put them out there. Now I can work on 6 more from that information and put it out there, as opposed to spending a year making 12 products that I think are perfect and half of them are throwaways, and I've just spent a year on them. So there's a fine line. You want to make a good product, but you want to get it out there for sure. And the longer you wait, then you're stretched, and the more expensive that product becomes to you, because you put so much more time and energy and worry into it and all that. So just go for it. When to say yes. There's all sorts of opportunities out there. When do you say yes? When do you say no? It's a big debate. Some people say yes to everything. Some people say no, just really do a narrow focus and say no to everything else. It's kind of the question of where do you put that energy, that hustle, that finite energy, where are you going to put it? Because yes is good. It connects you to new things. It keeps you interested. It leads to unexpected opportunities. It gets your name out there. But obviously, it has to be the right yes that is in line with your goals. So like I was talking a bit before, for me, like judging a show or doing a small art collaboration is a lot more fruitful than doing an art exhibit. And I talked about that a little bit. An art collaboration, like a little thing, like I took part in this thing. Oh, it's just, the theme was chair, and you got a piece of paper this size, and that was it. And then you had to send it back to the person. That was the best, because it was this little. It was different than furniture, so it took me out of my rut, but it was associated with furniture, because the topic was chairs. It was part of a community thing, and it was fast, and it rejuvenated me. So that was, yeah, definitely I'm going to say yes, you know? And it's less effort than doing an entire art show. So it's important to think about that. All right, Portland, crowded. Everybody doing everything all the time. I've never known a place quite as crowded of makers and self-employed people and creative types. And it's exciting, and it's a struggle too. One of the most important things is that, not just in Portland, I mean, I found this in the Toronto area, just asking people find people that you admire their work or something, and just ask them. So when I started woodworking, I emailed the school. I said, what can I do to be a more desirable candidate? It was in Australia. He said, you're in Canada. Here's 10 woodworkers in Canada, males. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know up from down in the woodworking world. I just emailed them. I didn't even look them up or anything. They all answered, and almost all of them gave, and I didn't ask for anything. I just said, I'm new to woodworking. Any advice or information, at however small, would be useful because I know nothing. That's all I said. Almost all of them were like, come to my shop, have lunch, we'll talk, the ones in the same province as me. And so I went and visited all these woodworkers. Now, had I emailed them and said, can I come to your shop and will you tell me everything you know, that probably would have alienated them. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. And luckily woodworking is a very friendly field. But without that, I would have had no context to place my next actions in. And had I thought that through, I probably would have said, oh, nobody's going to email me back, or why would they care about me, or why would they help me? But since I was naive, and I just emailed them, so just ask. There was another time, there's this thing called Emma Lake. It's this collaborative event in Saskatchewan. Every other year, you go out for a week, and you just make stuff. 100 artists are invited every time. There's every shop you can think of under a big tent. So there's a woodworking shop, a steel shop, blacksmithing shop, a jewelry shop, all that kind of stuff under each tent, and a big pile of materials for free. And you just make all week. Nobody sleeps or anything. You just drink and use table saws. Stay up all night. And the only rule is that you're not allowed to make something by yourself. You have to work with others. Collaborative event. Anyways, it's invitational only, so I really wanted to go when I was just starting out. And I thought, they're never going to invite me. I mean, they invite a famous person one year, and then they won't invite them the next time. And so I just asked. I just emailed them. I was like, this is probably crazy, but I really want to go. Anyways, they let me go. So the next time they had it, I said, hey, can I come again? And they let me go again. So you never know. And it was a really valuable, pivotal experience. And then finally, same thing. When I went to Toronto to start looking for a job, first thing, back in the days of Yellow Pages, I opened up the phone book, I wrote down all the woodworkers in the Yellow Pages, and I started walking around town. Luckily, the second place I went to was like a co-op shop, and this guy was there, and I said, can I have a job? And he said, we don't have any jobs, but what's going on here? Because I always didn't know what I was doing. And he sat and talked to me for 2 hours. And it turns out he was the head of a department of a local woodworking program, so he was very passionate about helping young people get into woodworking. I just lucked out. But he went through my list, and he's like, don't go to any of those places because they're awful factory cabinet shops, and you're going to hate it, and you're going to give up on woodworking. And he actually walked me down the street to the cabinet shop that didn't hire me right away, but eventually ended up hiring me. And so it's all these unexpected people helping you that can move you along, especially when you don't know what the hell doing. Like he told me even the basics. I didn't know the difference between cabinetry and making furniture. I didn't know one's making boxes and one's making chairs, but I figured that out because of him and all those other people. Very briefly, inspiration versus imitation. You get it. We're in this town. You're all looking at each other's work, and everybody starts doing the same thing, and it's kind of depressing. And you're like, oh, that's awesome what they did, but I just sketched that in my sketchbook yesterday, and now I can't make it. So at least that's what I go through. It's a double-edged sword. So I like to look at everybody's stuff and look at furniture online, and I do it all the time. But I really have to tell myself, look outside of my field. Look at other stuff that other people are doing, because you can get, and don't go, I'm looking for inspiration, just be engaged, because then you have other ideas rolling around in your head. Like a totally different hobby, like sewing, or I do a little bit of Heno stuff. It's just totally different than woodworking, and it just gets me out of the rut. I think that's really important in a crowded atmosphere, where it's just like, it can have this pressure on you all the time of everybody doing everything sort of in the same, like, oh, the heritage trend is happening, so everything you do that might touch the heritage trend makes you feel like an idiot. So looking for outside inspiration and always reminding yourself what makes you you, what is your unique history and aesthetic and all that kind of stuff. Finite resources, you can compete for them or you can share them. And I think the key between those two is just to, it's almost a mental game you play with yourself to just focus on the sharing part and not worry about the competing for clients part. So for instance, my shop is a shared shop. There are like 6 or 7 of us now, which is crazy. I can't believe we're still getting along and there's still plenty of space for everybody. But it's great because we have a middle spot. Each of us have some tools. We put them in the middle. So instead of each of us taking out a $70,000 bank loan, we just have a shop that we can use. And a woodworking shop takes a lot of space, whether you're one person or 6 people. So we get this 2,300 square foot shop. The tools in the middle, we each get our bench space around the outside. So that couldn't happen if you weren't in a crowded community. If you were in a little town just by yourself, you'd have to do it all by yourself. It makes rent super cheap. And you are each other's resources. Not only the tools, but their expertise, and problem solving. You can work together. And also when one person's really busy and one person's really slow, the slow person helps the busy person make some money. It actually works out really nicely. It kind of helps even out those bumpy times that you have as a creative person. So I always try to sort of plug my ears to the negative, like, oh, I'm never going to make it work because there's too many people fighting with the same client or something like that, and just try to focus on what wouldn't have been possible if not for the crowd. Along those same lines as events and groups. The more creative people you have in the town, the more potential for things like the Curiosity Club there are. If you're in a little town, that's just not going to happen. So just taking part in these kind of things, and that's actually partly why I did this talk. And you can do like little charrettes, little design charrettes and critique groups. The more people you have, obviously professional associations, and meetup groups. I've gone to a couple meetings of this group called LOD. It's for women designers, and it sort of doesn't really have an agenda. It's like this nebulous group. The email goes out, and they meet, and then they just talk about whatever it happens to be. But it's actually, I've gone to a couple meetings. It's really cool. Somebody will bring an article that they read and talk about all the implications of that article. Somebody will bring a project they're working on. People critique it. There's a lot of. I just went to a meeting and felt totally rejuvenated afterwards, and that wouldn't have happened if there weren't like a million designers to come to that meeting. So, and things like that, MLA conference and stuff. All these things build your energy, your ideas, your resources, your support, because we all need that support and help. So the more makers are, the more support there is. There's always someone cheaper. I'm not going to go into that too much. Hopefully all these things I've been talking about give you confidence in your value, and you realize it's more important to build a sustainable business than to beat out the next guy. And maybe he'll get that job, but if you got that job, then you'd be burned out and broke. So. And again, the psychological edge of competition, it can mess you up or spur you on. Sometimes you can have a positive competitive relationship with your peers, where you're driving each other to do better and better, and that's really great. And sometimes you can start second guessing yourself and thinking you're not good enough. So that's just a mind game you play with yourself to make you focus on those positives, the excitement of competition, rather than being unnerved. And standing out in the crowd being the hardest part. But again, I think everything I've been talking about is what leads to standing out. And most importantly, working on visibility in many different ways, online, getting involved in local events, professional venues, not hiding away in a hole. But once you're out there, being sincere, and also to keep your interests up. I think people respond to that, and you respond to them responding, and I think that's the most important thing. And I think that's maybe how you stand out. The elements. Just because you're strategizing about the hustle and strategizing about how to move forward and to make progress doesn't mean you have to be cynical. Doesn't mean that you're using people. Just because you're seeking opportunities doesn't make you slimy. And I think that's the important thing. You don't have to be a cheesy networker. You can try to seek openings based on your true interests. So it's always about going back to that, figuring out your own value and your own why you're in this thing, and how do these opportunities line up with that. And not trying to hide your personality. Like I've seen a lot of people I know like try to be, in their attempt to be professional, like maybe sort of be blank. But I think people really want to connect to you. And so I think that's a really important thing that goes along with not being cynical and to being sincere and respecting the people that you're dealing with. I think it's really important. People know when you're trying to use them. So just try to be engaged and respectful. Figuring out when you plugging into different kinds of income, different customers, different colleagues, and all those little bits add up to something. So we all know, like, oh, income, you can do custom, you can go into stores, you can do craft fairs, you can teach, you can do workshops, you can give away information, you can judge, you can do online stores, social media. All those things we all know, but a little bit from each of those things starts adding up. Same with figuring out where your customers are, people you know, social media, commenting on other blogs, commercial work by groups and associations, doing collaborations and tapping into other people's networks is a really good way. And just building relationships with your colleagues. The more connected you are, basically. And so, each bit might be small and obvious, but together, hopefully, they build this momentum and this energy that you're looking for. And that's kind of sums up the hustle. Thank you. So I don't know if anybody has questions or ideas or. All right. That's best.
I had a question about, you were talking about how sometimes you need to decide who you want to associate with. You know, like for instance, if you're like, oh, this person wants me to sell their stuff in their shop. And then you're like, well, that's not really my bag. Do you have any tactics when you're dealing with it? Because this could be a touchy situation, or like somebody wants you to give a talk at some kind of thing you really don't want to be part of. Like kind of potentially touchy situations where you don't want to make an enemy or somebody not like you, but you also don't want to be part of that. Like,
Yeah.
How do you do that?
That is a fine line. And first of all, I would say that while I do try to line up my interests, I also try not to be too cool for something. Like for instance, there's just a main video thing. You're going to talk at the Oregon Guild of Woodworkers, which is a whole different thing than hand-eye supply. You know, it's not. It's for hobbyists, like retired hobbyists, basically. But I'm doing that because I still find it interesting to talk to them and valuable to be a part of what they do. So it's not about like saying, oh, I'm like trying to craft this certain image, but it's just, do I get something out of this? And yeah, you just have to be, luckily a lot of stuff happens via email these days, which makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
So you can just make up an excuse sometimes, or sometimes you can just say my plate is too full. I usually, it seems really sort of almost cowardly, but that's how I go about it, because you don't want to say, no, you're not, you don't do anything for me. But I mean, some opportunities, I mean, some, like the people that wanted the entryway desk and the pearls, or they wanted to cash wrap for less than the materials. In that case, I felt it was important to say $350 doesn't even cover half of the materials, and it's taking like a month to do. Because I feel like sometimes you need to educate. It's, people just don't know, you know. So
A lot of what you're talking about is talking about building community interest in what it means to make skilled products. So labor is something we kind of love to handle on. And so a lot of the engagement opportunities aren't just self-beneficial, but community beneficial, because more people understand how much labor, especially on a small scale, without economies of scale, it means it's completely different to make.
yes, exactly.
So there is an attribution that does help us, even if it is a kind of slow help.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, yeah, informing people when the value, their perceived value is way up, and also not doing things for too cheap, because that weakens the whole community.
You were talking about how you weren't as interested in going the route of like fine art or like doing art and more like furniture. That's what it sounded like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
Well, that's a complicated story. But basically it comes down to something pretty simple, which is that there's something about furniture, the interaction from the use, you know, people using it and people touching it and all that kind of stuff, that's really appealing to me, and that fuels my fire. And also the, that being sort of the content, the interaction with the piece and the details of the piece that shape somebody's everyday, that being the content, as opposed to structuring these other narratives, which is fine if that's what, you know, an artist wants to do, but to me that's just not my passion. So, you know, I went to OCAC, which is a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and so I spent 4 years struggling with that pressure of feeling like there had to be a different meaning or something before realizing that I needed to embrace what I responded to, what I felt I could offer as well. So just, it's taken a while to come to terms. And it's a lot of work to do art, especially when it's not your passion. Like I've just done it a few times. I'm like, oh, I didn't do a very good job, and I don't feel very interested in this, and I don't even know why I'm doing it, sort of thing. So it's just sometimes you just have to realize that my forte is something else.
So before diving into your own business individually, you obviously did a variety of things.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if most of your preparation comes from that, or did you, before taking the leap to do it on your own, did you do a lot of research and preparation, or was it all kind of through experience?
It was mostly through experience, watching the businesses I worked for and seeing what worked for them and what didn't work for them. I also did side jobs pretty much that whole time. Pretty much, well, maybe the third year is when I started getting paid to do side jobs. And so that was a real learning experience. I screwed up so many times. And like I mean, I still screw up, but especially at the beginning, like, well, my first thing I ever made was for myself, so that was good, but I made this huge entertainment thing. It took me forever. I got it home and the TV wouldn't fit. It was too small on the TV. There was like a bunch of stuff like that, but at least it was, I had my day job, so that was fine. So I got a lot of that out of the way when it didn't matter as much. And then, I often did side jobs. While I was working just on weekend and stuff, I learned a lot that way. And then also, I never mentioned this Mercy Corps thing, which everybody should know about. Maybe everybody does. Mercy Corps has a business class, 6-week business class, which I took, which is really good, super basic for people just like me, one person who doesn't know what the hell they're doing business-wise. You learn like the basics. Should I be a sole proprietor? Should I be an LLC? That kind of stuff. But they also have a savings program. So if you do that class and if you make under a certain amount of money, you save, when I did it, it was you save $1,000 and they give you $3,000. Now it's even higher. It's like you save $1,200 and they give you $5,000 or something. To spend on your business, on pretty much equipment. But there's a little bit of leeway for business cards and that kind of thing. And it's the most amazing thing. That's a lot of money for a small person. And that was how I was able to get some equipment that was enough so that I could contribute to this shared shop and be a part of that. And not to mention the information that you learn. So, and they make you do like a business plan and everything like that. So that was really valuable. And I did all that before I went in. And then I waited until I got a big side job. So I got the Cardinal Club, the restaurant across from, it doesn't have a sign, it just says bar restaurant open really big across from Oilers. And I did the bar top, so it's like 17 feet with 4 feet on either side, and the back bar cabinet and everything, and all the tabletops. So I got that commission and I quit my job basically, because I needed to know I had at least like 2 months where, well, 2 months worth of pay, but they wanted it in 5 weeks. So it was like really crazy start to like move into the shop and make this bar thing, and there was an injury. But that's okay, I'm fine. I'll be back.
Did you get that on time?
I did, thanks to some of the people in this private community. Yeah, I called on some friends and they helped me. I was going to install it all by myself, which was stupid anyway. But then I had this big, like, cut finger with a big bandage on it, so I could only sort of use one hand. So I got some help. Got it done that time. But lots of learning experiences. Don't work all night and then get up at 5 in the morning. That's the experience. But yeah, so it was a long sort of 10 years of little dribs and drabs of learning from others and learning on my own, and then proper education. And at OCAC, they taught some production and some business stuff too. So sort of adds up to enough information. I'm still learning as I go though.
Wondering about process, how it's maybe changed throughout the course of your career, and maybe like any techniques that you found that help evolve the product, and how to keep it fresh, and keep your creative product always evolved.
Mm-hmm. So process in relation to the woodworking, not the business.
Yeah, right, the creative process.
Well, it's changed a lot because just coming from knowing nothing about woodworking. I mean, I just learned so much. And also from working in the cabinet shop, I was focused mostly on plywood and sheet, like flat sheet goods. And then the more I learned about solid wood, it became more dimensional. There's so many techniques. But I would say, there's so many, it's hard to tell. But lately it's been about simplifying, figuring out which techniques that I want to do. So when I started Heno, I'm going to offer these products, so I'm going to have to make them more than once. So I have to think, what do I actually enjoy doing? You know, what do I absolutely not want to do? I mean, I don't want to sand, but you can't get away from that. You just got to do that. Unless you're doing the burn finish. That's what's nice about burning. Sand them. But so building, I mean, there's so many millions of woodworking techniques, and I'm always learning, and that is very exciting. Like last week, I did a cove cut for the first time, which is passing the wood across the blade on an angle, and then it cuts very slowly, like a teeny tiny shave, a little bit off at a time, and then it cuts like a cove in the whole length of the wood. And that was really exciting. I was sort of in a rut, also feeling a little bit bored. And it was really exciting to do that. And so sometimes I'll just try that just for the hell of it. In fact, that was from like a coffee table from my apartment. So I was like, I just want to try this, I want to try something new. So that was really important. And then I got tons of ideas. As soon as I did the cove, I was like, oh, I sat down on my sketchbook. I was like, do this. So just introducing a new technique can be really valuable. And the other important thing is where I figured out when to spend all the extra time and go that extra mile to make it perfect, and when it's a total waste of energy that nobody's gonna notice. So that's been really important to me too.
Do you feel like that's mostly knowing who the audience is, or just in general you can
Just
certain
experience.
things will never be appreciated for visuals?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's never gonna, it's always like, you know, I'm in there standing in this little thing and looking like right there, but nobody else is ever gonna go like that. Or sometimes somebody will pick out a little thing that you don't think matters at all, and you're like, can you just look at the rest of them instead of this one little, like, knot in the wood that, you know, whatever. You're never gonna win that way, but just experience of spending a lot of time on every single tiny detail, and then you deliver it to the client. And they never notice that one thing, or, you know, but they notice this thing, so you see what really excites people and you spend time on that.
Oh, what, do you ever think about hiring more people on to work with you, or maybe you do, like, but also, and if you do you ever worry about like personality conflicts? Like, I need help, but who am I gonna find that's gonna see my work the way I see it and see the vision and like do things the way that I envision it, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like 8 questions.
That's a good question. It's a lot of good questions. I hire people as I need them. So I've never had an employee, but for a big job, well, it's usually my shopmates, but there's a funny thing because you can't hire somebody for more than $600 or else it becomes complicated with taxes and all that. They're casual labor if they make less than 600, and then they have to become an employee. So I can't hire anybody for more than $600 worth of hours, basically. So I just do it on a per project basis. And also, I don't have a steady enough, like my income is like spikes and drops and spikes and drops. So I don't have a steady enough thing to be able to bring someone regularly. But there's another benefit of the crowd. There's a lot of like-minded makers in this town. And a lot of people I feel like I trust, if not right away after talking about it. But the short answer is yes, that would be a concern. Because especially when you're part of what you're selling, or a big part of what you're selling to people is you. When people come to you for custom work, it's about the relationship, it's about your vision and all that stuff, and they're looking to you to sort of guide the process. And so, how does that work if you have an employee? And yes, I'm pregnant. And so I started wondering, like, when I have this baby, I'm gonna have to hire someone to do pretty much 100% at first. And so I am wondering how that's gonna work. How do you build those relationships with people with an employee? So yeah, it changes everything. I guess you have to then start crafting the value statement of your business as a group, and maybe start emphasizing what's good about the other person, you know, bringing the other person's skills and vision and stuff to make it a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah.
As you do custom work, do you have any tips that you've learned as far as working with your aesthetic, but also making sure that the client's really happy with what the outcome, but like maintaining that balance so that you're not sacrificing your brand, your style, just to make them happy? You have
Yeah, that's a toughie. That's a real tough one. And there are some jobs that I just haven't worked out that way, and I just don't put them on my website, basically. And I think everybody has a little bit of that. Like, are you going to turn down a good job just because it's not perfectly in line with your vision? Probably not. You're just not going to market that. Yeah. But there was a bedroom suite I did that part of it was in one of the first slides, but it was the guy had grown up on a cranberry farm, and he wanted a cranberry-themed bedroom suite. And he didn't pick me because of me. He hadn't like seen my website and said, "Oh, I love your style." He went to OCAC and basically was, I think he was looking for someone who had recently graduated and maybe would be cheaper, and which was me. And I I tried not to be cheaper, but I must have been because, anyways, I got the job. I made a bed and a dresser and 2 nightstands. But when he first approached me, he wanted the panels of all those things to be, he had bought fake cranberry branches from Michael's, and he wanted them to be in epoxy, like, in a thick layer of epoxy. And so I just said no. I said, look at my website, you can see my aesthetic, this is what, I think we could come to a compromise, but I prefer something a little more clean and modern and blah, blah, blah. I get my elevator speech. And he wrote back and he said, we can work something out. And so we worked something out, and I would say it's not what I would have done if I had 100% freedom, but compared to a Michael's branch in the epoxy, it was a lot better. But that being said, that entire job was a struggle. It was a power struggle. Every single interaction with him was a power struggle, probably because of these different approaches. But I think in the end, it came to something. He had all these antique cranberry scoops, these wooden antique cranberry scoops, and so they're like a big fork with a basket on them. And so I took the tines and I made them, the handles and everything were them, and different elements of those scoops I incorporated into the design. And he lived in sort of like a traditional arts and crafts style house, so I did some of the lines to go with that, which is not usually my style either, but I liked that it fit in, that resonated with me. And then instead of the branches, I got this friend of mine who's a really brilliant painter, Isaac Yoder. He painted these like oil paintings of beautiful cranberry branches. So it was like trying to find that compromise of where I could feel comfortable with what I was offering him, what I want, and selling it to him. That was, I always had to sell it to him. Like the richness of the oil paints and the texture of the scoops and all that kind of stuff. Like it just, I had to work hard to get him to come along with me. And I think that job actually is what taught me what I didn't realize before that. I think I was looking to the customer to drive the situation. And then I realized, no, they're looking to me to drive this boat. They don't know the process. They're not familiar with what comes next. They want you to have an aesthetic vision. They want you to take what they're telling you. Like they tell you what they want, but then they want you to make it into something bigger and better than what they're saying. And that took me a long time to figure out, and I think it's one of the most important things is to realize that they want to be satisfied, and they want what they, their little list of things they want, but they need a lot more from me than I realized at first. And so having the confidence to push back a little bit is what I do.
I guess on the opposite of that, for like your spikes and valleys of business plan, have you thought about doing more volume things like your cables, like holders, or your utensil trays, like more smaller items that are, say, shippable?
Yeah, that's the big thing. Yeah, exactly. You have to do more. I just started this Heno thing.
Yeah.
I just did the sort of the price point break. Is 20 items of each of those, so I have to make them in batches, which is fine. I mean, that's what I was thinking when I opened it, but that's a whole new world to me. But yeah, that's why I went small. Because furniture is so cumbersome and so time-consuming that, and I think also you can work with. That's the other great thing about having a crowded community. You can work with people that have capabilities and still share your same values, but maybe have some machinery that they can do more. Or like, for instance, that brass cable holder that I showed. That one I have to cut, I have a horizontal bandsaw, cut every single piece, and then I have to file the end, and then I have to drill it on the drill press in this little jig. Like, is that where I should be putting my energy, or should I be teaming up with a metal shop for that part? So it's finding that balance of
the grinding the edge.
Yeah, is me grinding that edge, really bringing my voice to that project. And also nobody's going to pay for it. Like the prices I had originally on Heno, I just think were way too high because they were based on me doing everything about one product. And as soon as I started building in, well, what if I make 20 at a time? What if I buy the pieces of brass cut, that kind of stuff. I could start bringing it down to something that was more palatable and more accessible to more people, which is what I want.
Keep it under 5 pounds.
Yeah, well, that desk that was on the opening slide, I'm offering that as a product, but it's like $600 to ship. So I just made me one that's got knockdown fittings so the legs come off. And now it's $150 to ship. So there's a huge, that one little design change made a huge difference. So you can't charge half the price of the product to ship it. Yeah, or maybe you can. I can't.
I think it's a free rack for our podium. We've got some pollen that you can.
I gotta do a value. I'll think about it. I'll email you.
Before we wrap up, do you have any parting advice for people aside from what you said?
Yeah, it's just aside from that.
Yeah. Especially dealing with the very first steps in going towards what you're doing, deciding to get people who are completely not this bad. Think about that. You know what I mean? So going to school, or what one single thing you think has been the most important that got you on this path.
If I had to pick a single most important thing, it's other people.
Yeah.
Asking other people for advice, and just in that same vein, just them helping you figure out the context that you're working in, because it's really easy to be in your own head and not even know how to access the information about what's going on around you if you're a beginner. And so one thing, I think I missed a slide or something, because one thing I didn't say is that one thing that's really important, and I think talking to other people really helps, is dispelling those myths that there's this person out there who does everything right every time and who never needed any help and who's always busy. I think that can happen a lot with Instagram and Facebook. People craft this perfect image of their personal lives and also their business, and it can make you feel like you're just not succeeding. And I think that's the most important thing, is dispelling those myths and realizing that everybody has ups and downs, and not just believing that you can do it. And part of that is talking to other people who are honest and sincere, who will say that to you and will help you and guide you in the right direction. And another thing that's great is doing it part-time. It's hard because it takes that extra energy and everything like that, but trying to do things in the most low-risk way possible so that you don't lose everything if it doesn't work out, And it's really easy to do now that you can do a website, you can even do a store with Big Cartel. That's what I couldn't figure out forever, was how to do a store, how to get money, how to get that transaction thing. But Big Cartel does it for $10 a month, and it's really easy to use. Those kind of things make it a lot easier to put yourself out there without risking a lot. You don't have to sink your whole savings into it, for instance. And you can still have a part-time job or something. I think that might be the way to go for small businesses, just trying to figure out what direction to go in. And there's a lot of trial and error and failure that can happen without ruining everything. Thank you.
So we return on February 25th with mead maker Chrissy Mannion's Airport of Kukulon Farms with her talk, Mead. Mead is the newest old thing, most likely the first fermented beverage on the planet. Alcohol from honey has been made by essentially every civilization on Earth during all epochs of time, dating back at least 8,500 years and likely much earlier. There's strong evidence that mead was enjoyed by our Paleolithic ancestors. In the last 10 years, the number of licensed meaderies in the U.S. has exploded from about 30 to well over 200, with meads ranging from 5.8% alcohol to 21.8% alcohol, dry to sweet, sparkling to still, and flavors including fruits, spices, flowers, and chili pepper. There's a mead for every food pairing and a mead for every occasion. Whether your favorite regular poison is wine, beer, cider, or sake, there's a mead for you. Curious? Come learn and taste the lore and magic of mead. That's 2 weeks from tonight, and let's give Amanda one more round of applause. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I called them like
Well, I'm just curious, like, why are you driving at the wall? And.
I don't know. Go straight and then just take a right. Keep going. Just keep going.
So it's like, it's like playing, like, why are you driving? Did you get that text message? Yes. Yeah.